It is time to bring in Arthur Schwartz, the food maven. Arthur joins us on a Monday morning, and we talk food. We have some holidays conjuncting with some food coming up. Good morning, Arthur.
Two big food holidays, Passover and Easter, related to each other by eggs. Other things, too. But I always love to bring up the fact that both these holidays, religious holidays, the food is centered around eggs. And why is that? You should know, Marshall. Didn't you grow up with grandparents on a egg farm?
Yes, but that doesn't mean anything. When I was a kid, I was just concerned on eating the food, not learning about it.
The thing is, chickens lay more eggs as the days get longer.
Yeah, they do. That is absolutely true.
Now, it's hard to understand this today when most chickens are raised in artificial light to keep them producing eggs. I think so. They're also bred, of course, to produce a lot of eggs. But think about it. In ancient times, what did we know? What did humans know, except that these birds produced a lot of eggs at this time of the year, and so they became incorporated into various fertility rites and iconography, and I could go on and on. And I must say, I once got into a lot of trouble when I was the food editor of the Daily News by putting this fact on the cover. Or Easter, that year, I remember, Easter and Passover came out the same time, as they do this year. The first night of Passover is the 15th, which is a week from Friday, and Easter is Sunday. That mean, by the way, that must mean that this is Good Friday, this Friday. So it's all upon us, and I know more about Italian Christian food than I do most other Christian food. But I can tell you that in Italy, where they do live to the seasons, that there are a lot of egg dishes this time of the year. This is the time when you make stacks of frittata with different vegetables, new vegetables that are coming up. And I love that. But anyway, back to the holidays. As we know, the Greeks, for instance, make these red eggs, which I did once. I did it the natural way. You can buy dye, but I read somewhere, and I'm sure you can find this on the internet if you look. No, I can even tell you because it's so easy. The Greeks make these red eggs, and as I said, you can buy dye, but what will really work is onion skins. You boil the onion skins with a little bit of vinegar, and then you hard cook the eggs in that water, and they will turn out to be this mahogany red color, which is the authentic egg color for Greeks. And I must say, I used to have she's still my friend, and she's still Greek, but we haven't seen each other in quite a while, and she used to give me a gift of a basket of Greek eggs. Then, of course, we should not mention the famous Ukrainian Easter eggs, which are decorated with very elaborate designs, some of which you can buy and affix to your eggs. I don't know how to do it myself. I've never even tried, but I believe it's you paint the eggs in wax, the shells, and then dip them in dye, and that's how you get those designs. Then, in my Jewish experience, I distinctly remember one of my great memories of Passover is the egg delivery. My grandmother, who lived in the same house with us, in a two-family house in Brooklyn, used so many eggs at Passover that she had to have, I don't know who delivered them. I mean, maybe it was an egg farm for all I know. But she would literally get a case of eggs. I don't know how many dozens of eggs that was, but it was an enormous number of eggs. Let me just say that one of the recipes that I make of hers still, every year, even if nobody else wants it but me, is her walnut cake, which is a true torte. It is totally the protein of the egg yolks forms the structure. The egg whites are the leavening, and there's no flour, no matzo meal even. It's just ground walnuts and sugar. So it rises beautifully, and it stays risen if you mix it properly. But anyway, that recipe alone takes 9 eggs, and my grandmother would make several of those cakes, plus lemon sponge cakes, which also take 9 or 10 eggs each, plus my kugel recipe, still listed to this day. This is the potato kugel I will definitely be making for our Passover Seder. It requires a whole dozen eggs. I mean, it does make 10 to 12 pieces of kugel, maybe less, but a lot of eggs. So it's a symbol of fertility. It's a symbol of the season, and there's no reason why every religion can't do that. Of course, Jews and Christians took their pagan customs into Christianity and Judaism along with them. But eggs are something that lasts. Anyway, this is my potato kugel, because I've already gotten requests for this recipe from as far away as Portland, Oregon, a note saying, please share that again. So here I'm going to share it again. This takes, as I said, a dozen eggs. I have tried it with 10 eggs. I don't think it can go much lower than 10 eggs, but 10 eggs is good. So this is the formula: 3 pounds of russet potatoes, that's baking potatoes, and 3 pounds is not very much. So this makes a 12, what is it, a 9 by 13 inch baking pan full, meaning like a Pyrex dish. I do use my Pyrex 9 by 12 for this. So there's some preparation involved. You have to peel the potatoes and chunk them up because you're going to do this in the food processor. Now, here's a thing. You can keep peeled, chunked up potatoes in a bowl of cold water until you're ready to put them in the processor. But don't do this hours ahead. You can't. I once made the mistake, by the way. This was with sweet potatoes, which is a different story, but still. I did the sweet potatoes way ahead and kept them in water, and they all sort of exploded in the oven. I forget what I was even making. I do remember, though, it was a mess. In any case, in a very large bowl, now this is a process that helps prevent the potatoes from turning color, which is a big problem for some people. I mean, you don't want them to turn gray. Sometimes they'll turn pink. I do a few things to prevent this from happening. One is, as my grandmother did, she put in a silver plate spoon. I happen to have that very spoon. And what that does is when silver tarnishes, you've got tartar on the surface, and that helps prevent the potatoes from turning. You can use a big pinch of cream of tartar if you don't happen to have a large. I say silver plate because silver plate gets tarnished much quicker than sterling silver, and so if you put in a well-polished sterling silver spoon, this might not help. It's got to be a tarnished spoon. In any case, that's one thing, or the cream of tartar. And then this process. So start by beating the eggs. This is a dozen eggs. I use a whisk until they're well mixed, and then and that's in preparation for the rest of the recipe. And you're going to use a food processor fitted with the metal blade. And for 3 pounds of russet potatoes, baking potatoes, I say that specifically because they're starchier, and it's a texture thing. 2 medium onions. That amounts to 12 ounces of onions. I must say, I just read a cookbook the other day that gave it was an Indian cookbook, that gave all the onions in ounces, and I like that. Truthfully, the American standard is 3 onions to the pound, which would be 5.5 ounce onions. So 6 ounce onions is a medium onion. So 2 medium onions weighing about 12 ounces, and chunk them up, peel them, of course, and then put them in the bowl of the processor with the metal blade, and pulse the onions until they're very finely chopped, but not liquefied. Be careful here. You do want them very finely chopped, however. And scrape these onions into the bowl with the eggs and stir them in. And then stir in your starch, which in this case, because it's Passover, and because I like it, and even if I'm making this for Rosh Hashanah, I only make it a few times a year, I still would use matzo meal, 2/3 cup of matzo meal. So now you have this very big bowl with a dozen eggs, very finely chopped 12 ounces of onion, 2/3 cup of matzo meal, and a tablespoon, yes, a tablespoon of salt, and at least 3/4 of a teaspoon, but I like peppery potato kugel, so I would use a full teaspoon of freshly ground pepper, and you stir that all together. Now that's the base. The potatoes are the next. In the same processor bowl, you don't need to clean it, in, I would say, at least 3 batches. Process because if you put too many potatoes in the bowl at one time, you won't get the right texture. You want to process the potatoes until they're very finely chopped, but not pureed for sure. The pieces should be about the size of a grain of rice, mostly smaller, but no bigger than a grain of rice. By the way, if it's all a grain of rice, that's okay too. So do this in 3 stages, but as each 3 batches. As each batch is processed, scrape it into a strainer that you've placed over a clean bowl, and with a rubber spatula, or the back of a spoon, I like a rubber spatula, press out the moisture that's in these ground potatoes. You will see right away that what you're pressing out is starch that's going to turn color immediately. So immediately stir the potatoes, the freshly ground potatoes in the processor, into the egg and onion mixture. Now the onion the acidity of the onion also helps the potatoes to not turn gray. They may turn pink, but they won't turn gray. Discard all that liquid and potato starch that you've pressed out of the potatoes. Season the whole batter, of course, if you haven't already, with salt and pepper. And that's it. Now, what you want to do is to prepare your dish, a 13 by 9 inch baking pan. I like my Pyrex for this. Truthfully, I've never done it in the metal roasting pan. I have one the same size. My grandmother always did it in a metal pan, which is but I think the Pyrex gets it nice and crusty on the outside too. But anyway, you may have noticed there's no fat in this recipe so far. It's 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil. I actually have schmaltz in the freezer, and I'm going to use that melted chicken fat. And put 2 tablespoons-ish in your 13 by 9 inch baking pan, and turn the pan to coat the bottom and sort of halfway up the sides of the dish, and then place that empty dish, not yet with the potato mixture in it. In fact, you could do this while you're finishing up the potatoes. Put it in a 350-degree oven for 5 minutes. When the pan is heated, pour your batter, your potato mixture, into the dish. Press it down a little bit lightly. What will happen is that the oil will collect in the corners of the pan. It's a good thing, by the way. It's only a couple tablespoons of oil. Don't worry. By the way, I use plain vegetable oil if I don't have schmaltz, and then press it down in the corners so that the oil starts lapping over the top of the pudding. Then drizzle at least another tablespoon of oil or schmaltz, could be a little bit more. Drizzle that over the top of the pudding. Really, you just want it just on the surface of the batter. Put it in the 350 oven. 1 hour and 15 minutes. Now, gotta say, I like this reheated. I like this. I like it fresh. Could be a couple of hours after it's baked, because, it's a big holiday. A lot of people want to use their oven for other things. You can reheat it. In fact, I really do like it reheated because the edges get crispier. Now, it's interesting. In my family, we had crispy edge people and center cut people. And I bet you in every family that they divide that way. Do you want the corner, or do you want the edge, or do you want the middle? You can cut it into as many pieces as you want, but you're going to get at least 8 really hefty servings out of that. At least 8. We're going to be 8 at the most, so I'm not worried. 1 pan will be enough. So my menu for Passover, because apparently I'm responsible for making Passover this year, is, first of all, my nephew and his family are not eating meat, except the girls eat hamburgers and hot dogs. But there's no big slabs of meat anymore. In fact, my older great niece decided that we shouldn't be eating animals at all, but then she doesn't recognize that hamburgers or hot dogs are an animal. But certainly she's not going to take well to what I'm making, but, what can I say? Part of it she'll eat. I am making something that is actually more a Rosh Hashanah, a New Year's dish, than a Passover dish, because it's with tzimmus. Now, tzimmus is a sweet vegetable mélange, to use a Yiddish word. And in this case, it's carrots, prunes, onion, and the chicken and the whole dish is flavored with a lot of fresh ginger and honey. Now, I've made this many, many times. It presents very well, too, because you make it all in a cast-iron skillet. You brown the chicken. I use thighs only. If you like breasts, you can do, or drumsticks or whatever you like. You brown them first in a little bit of oil, and then they get covered with this glaze, we'll call it, of ginger, honey, and that's it, salt, pepper. And then you put it in a pan with carrots that you've sautéed a little bit, an onion that you've sautéed a little bit, and prunes, and a little water. You put the chicken back in, and that's all could be done way ahead of time. And then before dinner, you stick it in the oven. So that's going to be the main course. It's called crispy. You can look this up online. It's not my recipe. It's something I got from a contemporary kosher cookbook, and it's all over the internet. It's called crispy chicken with tzimmus, with carrot tzimmus. There are several recipes like that on the internet I've checked, but the one that I make is called crispy chicken thighs, actually, with tzimmus. So that's the main course. Now, interestingly, my great nieces have taken to matzo balls lately. They're not getting them on a holiday, so they don't associate it with any holiday. They just like matzo balls. And I'm going to make a broth. Actually, I'm going to make the broth today, a good soup, put it in the freezer. And at the last minute, I'll make matzo balls. So we'll have soup and matzo balls. We'll have this crispy chicken with the ginger honey glaze and tzimmus, potato kugel. Haven't decided on a vegetable, but we have to have a vegetable of some kind. It's asparagus season, so we always used them. When I was a kid, that was a big treat because asparagus were not a common vegetable in the 1950s, not at all. But we all loved asparagus, so my mother would treat us to asparagus, my grandmother, on Passover. Tis the season. And we'll have the walnut cake for dessert. I think I'm going to have to make something chocolate, and there are a lot of Passover chocolate cake recipes out there. Flourless chocolate cake, not my favorite thing, but I'll find something because we do have a chocoholic in the family. She's 6, but to her it's not a good occasion unless you have something chocolate. Maybe I'll just make, I could make some kind of chocolate, I'm thinking maybe I could make some kind of chocolate sauce for my grandmother's walnut cake.
There you go.
Yeah. There were years, that I did never refuse to make the cake, but I got very discouraged about the whole thing because my sister would bake a Viennese table full of Passover desserts that were way more tempting than my very plain, homey walnut cake. And she would say to me, bake the walnut cake anyway because it's very good for breakfast. And she would take it and keep it for breakfast, and I never even got to eat any. So anyway, nowadays we don't have nearly as many desserts, so I think the walnut cake, maybe with a drizzle of chocolate sauce, which would be a very good combination, will satisfy the chocoholic in the family. So, do you celebrate Passover, or do you celebrate Easter, or do you celebrate paganism?
Probably paganism. I mean, I do a little bit of celebrating on those, but not so much. That I live alone and stuff like that. No, not really. I celebrate with food. I try to sample a piece of food that I've always associated with that holiday.
I've unfortunately, well, I shouldn't say that. I've been enjoying it. I've been eating a lot of things that I haven't eaten in a long time. And it's a Monday, and I only have 10 days before Passover. So if I want to get back on track with my weight, I'm not even weighing myself anymore. I judge everything by how my clothes fit. And so far, so good, even though I've had pasta and bread, and I actually had cereal yesterday morning. I have to talk about multigrain and bran-based cereals soon. I have been tasting a whole lot of different products and also reading a lot of labels and finding how misleading some information, not the actual nutrition labels are and the ingredient labels, but the promotion and the marketing of these things is ridiculous. Anyway.
Well, the contents of some of these things, for a while I was using a water enhancer called Mio. Okay.
Yeah, what does that do?
It takes regular water and it gives it a flavor and adds supposedly other things in it. But,
electrolytes?
Yeah, but you know what one of the ingredients turned out to be in it?
What?
An ingredient that's an antifreeze.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I mean, now it's in small quantities, but come on, I mean...
And you were consuming this?
Yeah, and it's still... Well,
please.
It has to be ice cold.
Well, so put ice in it.
But you can't always do that.
That would be the easiest solution, no?
Yeah, it would, but you can't always do that. So anyway,
in my long life, they've ever told me they didn't like the taste of water. What does it taste like to you?
When it's not cold. Except for tea and coffee, it's always much better ice cold.
Well, actually, I prefer tea cold. But that's maybe the only. I don't. Ice drinks are not the best thing for you, by the way. They're not good. It depends on who you talk to about this. But I have a Chinese health advisor. I'll call her. She's actually Korean, not Chinese, but she's a Chinese doctor-ish person. And she always warns away from iced drinks. Cold drinks, okay, out of the refrigerator, but really room temperature is best, she says. But then I've talked to doctors who say, no, that's BS, But anyway, I must say my tummy is always better if I'm not drinking iced beverages. That said, I do have cocktails on the rocks regularly. And I also drink iced tea, which I think is very refreshing.
When I think about Easter, I think about ham, unfortunately, and I'm not a big ham person.
All right, so we're going the Christian route here.
I'm not a big...
Speaking of ham, I'm with you on this, by the way. That's another seasonal thing. You've slaughtered the pig in January or December when the winter begins, and you've put it in the smokehouse, in the aging room, whatever it is, and now it's spring, and it's time to eat it. So that's also a seasonal thing. So I love ham, and one of the things I've been craving lately is a ham steak baked in milk. You should try this sometime. I rub the ham steak with a little ground ginger and mustard, put it in a baking dish, one where it fits just so, not a lot, and cover it with milk. Put it in the oven, 350 oven, 375 oven, and you bake it until all the milk has cooked out, and you're going to end up with this brown crust that is absolutely delicious. And you serve this with, now this is the part that I'm really craving, spoon bread. Spoon bread is a pudding-like or souffle-like cornbread. And I only recently found the recipe from the King's, I think it's called the King's Arms Tavern in Colonial Williamsburg, where I first had spoon bread. And I'm so nostalgic for this. I mean, this was probably, I was a boy. I was maybe 10 years old, so this was in the 50s. And since then, I crave spoon bread. Now, spoon bread, more or less, you make cornmeal mush, either with milk or water, meaning you just stir cornmeal into simmering liquid and with some salt and pepper. And then you let it cool. And then you beat in eggs, milk, salt, again, some sugar. I would put that in the milk in the beginning, or the liquid in the beginning, and baking powder. This is one way to do it. And you turn this all into a souffle dish, into a casserole, and bake it. The other way to do it is to separate the eggs and fold the egg whites in separately from the egg yolks, in which case I would still use some baking powder. Anyway, I have not made this in many years, but it used to be one of my favorite little meals, and I love lunch. It makes a great lunch. The ham baked in milk, spoon bread. I guess you could have a little salad with that. And I must say, what you need is a good Riesling wine to go with the ham and the spoon bread, and it's very sophisticated.
Now, for Passover, of course, there's matzo ball soup. Oh, you can, but
soup all the time. Some of the times the garnish could be matzo balls. Sometimes it could be other things.
I also like gefilte fish. I'm one of the few people in the world that like gefilte fish.
I do too.
I love it.
I really like a good gefilte fish, but besides that, fish is usually expensive. Hence, gefilte fish has gotten usually expensive. Everybody makes it with sugar. Now, you may have grown up. You had a Hungarian grandmother, so you may have grown up with it as a slightly sweetened dish. Did you?
No. Well, I used to put on it and I love to eat it with red horseradish.
Yes, me too. Oh. So the fact is, even mediocre gefilte fish from a jar tastes good with red horseradish.
Oh, the best. They wouldn't go near it.
Well, I don't know. Unless it's really good gefilte fish, it could really have an off smell.
Well, they just didn't like the jelly around it and stuff like that.
Oh, well, that I like a lot.
I know. What can I say? Oh.
My grandmother's jelly was the best, and the reason is she took the carcass of the fish. I mean, we were talking about from scratch gefilte fish here, and she boiled the bones and the head and tail and whatever with vegetables, and that became the bed to poach the gefilte fish on top of. So it ended up with a good gel. And we all liked and carrots. You know how you can tell gefilte fish from the other fish in the sea? It's the one with the carrots.
That's right. Well, I love gefilte fish, and I love that. And I do buy a jar of gefilte fish around this time of year every year when it's in this.
Yeah.
When it's in the
so
supermarket.
There are Mother's is a brand, and Manischewitz is a brand. I don't know which. I don't know. I have to go look in the store. By the way, my big kosher supermarket in Brooklyn, Pomegranate, which claims to be the largest kosher supermarket in the world, and an Israeli friend says, I don't know of anything like this in Israel. So I'm assuming that we have the biggest anyway. It's a very good supermarket, too. They already have their containers, meaning like shipping containers, parked outside on Coney Island Avenue, because they take all the non-kosher foods, as much as they can, and put it in these containers. And then they also have to close some aisles of the supermarket so that you can't purchase things that are forbidden. Then one aisle turns into just a matzah aisle, meaning a very long supermarket aisle lined with every kind of matzah you can think of, meaning from all different kinds of bakeries, including what we call shmura matzah, which is handmade matzah made under very, very strict supervision by various Hasidic communities. And then they sell it. And I always get a box and have to say that shmura makes the best matzah bride. Now, speaking of eggs, there's yet another use for eggs. We call matzah bride, is basically broken up matzah, soaked in some water, and then cooked with eggs, and it ends up being like noodles. You can't eat noodles on Passover because it's a wheat product. The only wheat product you're allowed is matzah. And by the way, if you're super duper observant, you do not eat matzo balls or matzo brei or matzo meal pancakes, which I'm going to make for my little nieces. You cannot eat those until the last day of Passover, of course, to use up whatever you haven't used during the week. It's a whole week-long holiday. But I love matzo brei, and we ate it for dinner when I was a kid. My father loved matzo brei. And sometimes my mother would make it, and I still do make it, with fried onions.
All right.
Yeah, and a lot of butter.
Butter is good. Yeah.
Butter, matzah, and eggs. Sort of heaven.
That's it. All right, Arthur.
All right. Well, I won't say Happy Easter, Happy Passover yet, but you got to be prepared for these holidays. So until next week, everybody have a great one. And I'm going to make broth today.
All right. I'll speak to you next week, Arthur.
Take care.
Arthur Schwartz, the Food Maven, here on Robin Hood Radio. Of course, you can catch Arthur on demand, robinhoodradio.com. Click on demand. Click on Arthur Schwartz, the Food Maven. Underwriting support for Arthur Schwartz, the Food Maven, Hillsdale Home Chef. More information, 518-325-7000, hgshomechef.com.